The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Chicago tries to get back its manufacturing mojo as a new digital era dawns on an old factory district.
Plus, one local artist is taking his art to the streets. His work might make you think differently about potholes.
And Governor Quinn has a cure for Chicago's pension problem, but will Mayor Emanuel take the governor's medicine? All of these stories and more on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight, a closer look at manufacturing's comeback in the U.S. and Chicago's role in its renaissance.
Goose Island is no Silicon Valley, not yet, but a new digital manufacturing lab in the North Side neighborhood, backed by millions in federal money, could turn Chicago into a regional hub for high-tech solutions.
Politicians claim it will create a flood of new manufacturing jobs, but others are skeptical.
Meanwhile, a group of young visionaries has already set up shop in the West Loop with dreams of turning their ideas into manufactured goods.
So this is the Kangaroo Cup, and it's designed to have 3 legs to be tip-proof.
26-year-old Katie Ozamis is a product designer working with an 11-year-old girl who came up with the original concept for the Kangaroo Cup, one that kids can't tip over. A key ingredient in its design is 3D printing. That allows Katie to actually see how the object looks and feels before it is mass-produced.
We can't afford to send off some cup design to China or to any manufacturer anywhere and have them come back and you can't hold them or they don't feel right.
Katie is a member of the nonprofit Catalyze Chicago in the West Loop. It's a collection of 19 entrepreneurs who pay $350 a month for a workspace. They also get access to workshop tools, computers, and digital equipment such as 3D printers that are revolutionizing the whole process of developing products.
And once you have a 3D printer that costs much less, now you can prototype whatever you want.
33-year-old Bill Feenup, an inventor and mechanical engineer, is one of the co-founders of Catalyze Chicago.
We don't do any manufacturing in this space. We want to focus on product development.
Another key to this new digital era of manufacturing is crowdsourcing, using companies such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo for startup money and to get new ideas directly out to the public.
The barriers have fallen, so we no longer have to try to pitch our idea to a company and get some senior leader in a company to like our idea. We can take it right to the crowd and say, do you like the idea?
Chicago, Carl Sandburg's city of broad shoulders, has long been a manufacturing hub. But since its peak in 1947, actual factory jobs have been on a steady decline. 4 decades ago, 30% of workers were employed in manufacturing. By 2012, only about 8% of the workforce had a job in factories. One glimmer of hope is robotics and digital manufacturing. Chicago recently landed a $70 million federal grant to build a research center on Goose Island for digital manufacturing. State agencies, colleges, and private companies are putting up another $250 million. Mayor Emanuel says the research facility will put Chicago at the center of advanced manufacturing.
This allows you to create an economic energy and a magnet that will pull in research and development facilities from companies that don't have them in Chicago. They'll now move them.
The promise that this high-tech manufacturing is going to create jobs for the jobless, I think is a false premise.
Dan Brown is a professor of industrial design at Northwestern University, an inventor and Chicago business owner. He developed a tool called the Bionic Wrench. More than 2 million have already sold. But Brown is skeptical about the digital manufacturing lab, calling it political showboating.
They're like patronage. You get a lot of money and you spread it around, and it looks like your party's investing in innovation, but there's no accountability to it.
There's 14,000 manufacturers just in the Chicago greater area, and not a lot of people know about it. But I think this whole spotlight now being on manufacturing is really going to help advance those manufacturers and bring onshoring manufacturing, bringing jobs back to the United States.
And joining us today is Hale Serkan, Senior Partner for the Boston Consulting Group and co-author of the U.S. Manufacturing Renaissance, How Shifting Global Economics Are Creating an American Comeback. Hale, welcome.
Great to be with you, Chris.
So in the last 10 years, the Chicago area has lost about 100,000 manufacturing jobs, part of a long-time trend. Are those jobs ever coming back?
Well, those kind of jobs probably won't come back. Manufacturing has shifted. It has moved from being brawn, people lifting things, to brains, people using computers and other techniques, because automation is saving people from having to do this.
Automation may be saving those people, but it's also the irony that the more automated a company is, the fewer jobs are needed.
Yes, but unfortunately, we compete in a global market, and when in a global market, we have to be competitive. If we try to keep those jobs, as some other countries have, like Brazil, what will happen is our costs will get so high that we'll be totally uncompetitive. So the best way to create manufacturing jobs is to actually automate, because that keeps us competitive.
The digital hub that's going into Goose Island on the north side has received a lot of attention. Mayor Emanuel says he's hoping this is going to lead to 40,000 new jobs in technology over the next decade. Is that realistic?
It's possible. I think it really depends on how all this plays out. The Chicago has been given a great gift. The digital manufacturing hub is a great way to catalyze manufacturing in the city. It's drawing in not just public money, which is about $70 million, but twice as much in terms of private money. We see major companies like Boeing and Siemens coming to Chicago to be part of this digital manufacturing. And there's a good reason for it. When you get a cluster of companies together, what happens is that all the engineers all start to talk about things, they start to learn things, and you get what is basically a Silicon Valley type effect if you do it right. I hope that the mayor and the deputy mayor and everybody else involved in it will see that and put the effort in to make sure that this happens, because it is a gift for our city.
But as you heard in the setup piece from Dan Brown, the professor at Northwestern University, he's worried that because there is so much federal government money here, $70 million, that it's going to be a lot of pork and not so much manufacturing.
Well, it could happen, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It could happen in Illinois.
Yes,
right?
it could happen anywhere. But I don't think that's going to be the outcome. If it's done right, remember that it's only about a third that's the federal money. 2/3 is actually coming in by companies, so that there's real money behind it. And these companies have serious intentions to make sure that they can benefit from digital manufacturing. And there are so many benefits that for many of them, this is an incredibly cheap and probably very high return on investment project.
Does this do anything to get jobs where they're needed most in Chicago, in those poverty-stricken and blighted areas that manufacturing has abandoned?
Well, if people have the right training, and part of, I think, the digital hub will be training, then they'll be able to get jobs. It may be a bit of a commute to Goose Island for some of those locations, but we have a great transportation infrastructure in Chicago, so people can do that.
And what kind of training is really going to be needed here?
Well, it's going to be training on what digital manufacturing is, right? Digital manufacturing is a wide range of things, from 3D printing to being able to link hardware and software together. So it's going to take some skills. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an engineer or even have a college degree to do it, but you need to understand the basics of it to be able to operate in a digital manufactured world.
Is this the kind of training, kind of skill that should already be instilled at the high school level?
I wish it was. I think our society would be so much better if, in fact, we were able to put the training in. Unfortunately, many of the vocational training opportunities have been taken out for cost savings, and that may have been a pretty bad investment for Chicago.
In terms of the digital center that's going in at Goose Island, you mentioned there's a lot of university investment. Why is that?
Well, because universities are where a lot of the innovation takes place. My colleague at Northwestern talked about the problems of it, but I think the benefits of this are pretty dramatic. Because you can basically bring people together, and the bringing people together will make it happen. I don't think we're going to find real problems with the government money involved. In fact, they're just the seed money. The real money will be put in by the companies, not just what they're investing now, but what they'll be investing later.
Is the idea that this could lead to a Silicon Valley type of economy a little far-fetched?
Well, Silicon Valley's so big, and it's only a few times have we seen things so big. On the other hand, I believe that if this has got the right stewardship and we focus on this properly, it will be a major thing for Chicago, and it will bring a lot of manufacturing jobs back to Chicago, which is something sorely needed because manufacturing jobs are often paying somewhere between $15 to $25 an hour starting, rather than a lot of the service jobs that are starting often at $8 or $9 an hour.
The Obama administration has announced these hubs all over the country: Detroit, Youngstown, Raleigh. What makes Chicago's different?
Well, I think it's because we got what I think is one of the best ones for our city. It's the digital manufacturing one. That is an area of manufacturing that is, in the process of exploding. There are so many things you can do, whether we saw in the interview there, 3D printing, but you can also find better ways to link the hardware and software that will allow manufacturers to be able to tailor products very much for their customers, and even things like when they need to do preventative maintenance, the machine will actually contact the company to know that there's preventative maintenance that's needed, and therefore you won't have as many failures, which means problems in all sorts of areas that is pretty much solved by this.
Do you see Chicago regaining its role as a leader in manufacturing, if not in the number of jobs?
Well, I think Chicago is a leading manufacturer. We're a big city. We're the third largest city in the country, and we still have a lot of manufacturing. I think people forget that this is still a manufacturing town, even with the reduction in the workforce in this area. And I think this will just give us a boost, in many ways a booster rocket to sort of put Chicago back where I think it should be on the map.
All right, on that note, we have to wrap things up. Thank you so much, Hale, for joining us. Now for some other stories trending this week.
Governor Quinn offered up a possible solution to fix Chicago's looming pension crisis without raising property taxes.
I am very open to discussing with our local units of government a way to share some of the income tax revenue beyond what we are today in order to help them with their challenges.
The governor and Mayor Emanuel have been wrestling with the issue of how to fund the pension problem without hurting homeowners and city union workers.
I think that I'm going to side with Governor Quinn for one basic reason. The reason I would side with him is because it wouldn't be the most feasible thing right now for us to have a housing tax when there are so other things and so many other ways that we can get the revenue going in the city.
In the wake of the controversy surrounding LA Clippers owner Donald Sterling, many companies, including McDonald's and State Farm Insurance, are taking a stand. The Illinois-based corporations have pulled their sponsorship, opting not to support the NBA team. The Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago is making a bold statement with the unveiling of a statue depicting Jesus as a homeless man. Displayed outside their headquarters in Chicago's River North neighborhood, the goal of the life-sized bronze sculpture is to bring awareness to the homeless population in Chicago.
I don't know how much a statue is going to increase awareness. It may seem like a waste of money in my eyes, but hopefully it will do something.
It's in keeping with freedom of speech and expression. You could put it up anywhere, I suppose, as long as someone who doesn't believe in Jesus can put up whatever statue they would choose to put up.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
Everyone is feeling happy these days. A new local version of the Smash song Happy, showing Chicago area Muslims dancing in and around the city, has gone viral. The filmmaker who produced the YouTube hit is hoping the video helps counter unflattering stereotypes. We'll get happy in a few minutes, but first on to the serious stuff. Our panelists, Doug Eibendahl, editor of RepublicanNewsWatch.com, Raquel Mitchell, Wheatland Township trustee, and Dan Mihalopoulos, Chicago Sun-Times reporter. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Good. Welcome to you all. Well, this week we saw Governor Quinn make somewhat of an end run around Mayor Emanuel's request for a property tax hike to solve the pension crisis. The governor suggested giving Chicago and other municipalities a bigger share of income tax proceeds if he can get lawmakers to make his temporary tax hike permanent. Doug, is this a good solution?
Well, no, I think it's very obvious. It's a very transparent attempt to try to rope in more support for keeping the so-called, what we thought was supposed to be a temporary income tax, to keep that permanent. He's trying to basically buy more support. But my question, as a Republican, a fiscal conservative, if we've got enough money to give back to municipalities, how about skipping the middleman and giving it back to the taxpayers?
I saw you shaking your head.
I'm in complete and total agreement with Doug. This is just another shell game. Basically, he's telling us, okay, we're gonna take from your pocket. The governor's telling us we're gonna take from your pocket with one hand, and don't pay any attention to it, because we're going to give you this little bit to the municipality. I'm in complete agreement. I honestly think that this is just another shell game to keep everything's status quo.
Now, Mayor Emanuel says he's more than happy to take the cash, but he doesn't believe that this is a permanent solution. He wants the governor to sign the bill that's on his desk that would open the door for a property tax hike. Dan, in an election year, how delicate a situation is the governor in here?
It's very delicate for the governor. Certainly he doesn't want to look as if he has any complicity in raising property taxes in the city of Chicago, although that's what the mayor is adamant is necessary here. Yes, he's open to getting more money from the state. Who wouldn't be? What mayor wouldn't be of any municipality in the state? At the same time, though, that's not a revenue stream that will be stable, that will please the bond rating agencies that have downgraded the city and that are expressing deep concern about the long-term future of the city's finances.
Who's in a tougher spot, the mayor or the governor here?
Well, the governor has his election first. The mayor's not up until next year. And I think the tougher thing for the mayor at this point will be convincing city council members to agree to a property tax increase. Although I've argued that clearly property taxes in the city are much, much lower than almost anywhere else in the metropolitan area. You take the same valued house in one part of the city and compare it to almost any suburb or most of the larger suburbs certainly, and the property tax bills are much smaller. They've kept that down because Mayor Daley didn't really want to touch that, and Mayor Emanuel is actually going somewhere where Mayor Daley was afraid to go, or at least wasn't forced to go.
Even so, though, do you think aldermen will vote in a property tax hike when they are months away from all seeking re-election, Doug?
Well, I thought Governor Quinn did one really good thing. Number one, Governor Quinn should sign the pension reform bill on his desk right now that would at least deal with some of the, at least part of the city pension problem. Governor Quinn supported state pension reform last year. He should, I don't know why he's hesitating. I don't think it's a big campaign risk for him to sign a common sense bill that at least deals with some of the problems with the city pensions right now. He should sign that. But then Quinn did one, I don't know why he's hesitating, but then he did one good thing. He stripped out the part that where the aldermen were looking for cover. They wanted the state legislature to basically say that the city council is forced to raise property taxes. They took that out. The aldermen do not have to raise property taxes. They could come up with other savings, but it's really their responsibility. And Quinn has done, I think he's done half the job. He needs to sign now what's on his desk right now.
A lot of big decisions ahead. Another big decision this week, the NBA has banned LA Clippers owner Donald Sterling for life, fined him $2.5 million, will put pressure on him to sell the team after alleged racist remarks became public. Does the punishment fit the crime, Raquel?
Indeed, the punishment does fit the crime, but there's so many. It's still fluid. The situation is still fluid. There's so many unanswered questions as far as this entire thing is concerned. I know people might say, "Well, what's missing? He said those racist remarks." Well, we don't know who released that tape. The girlfriend is apparently saying that she didn't do it. And I do have just a tiny bit, even though this guy is the worst racist that I've heard in at least 5 days. I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. But the reality is, where is this going to lead us as a society when we have a private conversation that's aired, put out in public? And I'm thinking that may be an issue further down the road. Is this setting some kind of precedent? But outside of that, it looks like to me it fit the crime.
Other team owners have raised that concern and said, is this a dangerous precedent? Should business owners be judged for their private actions, Dan?
I think the long-term consequences of this, the longest-term consequences, are certainly going to be legal. I don't think Donald Sterling is going to take it lying down because he figures he has an investment here, and do they have the power to strip him of his investment? It comes down a lot to the bylaws and the constitution of the NBA, but clearly this has been a club of owners who are heavily invested, that it's been heavily profitable for them, and at this point, until this point, I should say, they had no intention of banning anybody, although there's all sorts of just horrible things about Donald Sterling beyond the very poor record of the LA Clippers, but there's all sorts of racial incidents involving Sterling going back years and years that apparently were ignored by the previous commissioner.
Yeah, we're learning about a lot of that now. You talk about profitability. Major local companies, State Farm, McDonald's, joining a long list of people pulling the plug on endorsements. We saw this with Paula Deen after her remarks. How much of this, Doug, is about the advertising?
Well, I think that's actually helpful, though, because, I share Raquel's concerns about taking what is a private conversation and making it public. But I think there are some exceptions to that, and this is one. This was so over the top. I think it's a no-brainer. But so you've got a private phone call where there was not consent on both sides. So maybe it certainly in Illinois, you probably can never use that in a court of law. Well, this is not a court of law. This is a court of public opinion. And I think the advertisers, the corporations, are actually flexing their marketing muscle here, for a good result. And I think it's fine.
From one provocative topic to another, there's a provocative new piece of art outside the Office of Catholic Charities here in Chicago. It is a statue of Jesus wrapped in a blanket as a homeless man laying on a park bench. The artist says he wants to change the way people see homelessness. Raquel, do you see that statue helping in that realm?
Well, I saw the statue. It's absolutely, I think it's beautiful. It has a powerful message. I think it does give one pause to think about, what did Jesus really stand for? What does Jesus mean to them, and as far as helping those who are less fortunate? And it just so I'm usually not sentimental, but I actually like the statue, and I think that it would give people pause to say, oh, okay, so this is what this is all about, and kind of strip away all of the politics and all of the rhetoric that has to do with religion and being a part of Christianity and Christian philosophy. I think that just anybody who isn't familiar with Christianity or Catholicism would probably look at that as a positive figure.
If people look past living people who are homeless, will a bronze statue change minds, Dan?
I think, to me, it's interesting the change in the approach of the Roman Catholic Church. I'm not Roman Catholic, but certainly as a political reporter in Chicago, you have to observe the power of the Roman Catholic Church here as well as elsewhere. And there's been a shift both at the very top in the Vatican, I think, with this Pope, in focusing more on issues of social justice rather than perhaps some of the other sorts of moral issues that the previous Pope, now Saint, or 2 popes ago, and the previous Pope as well, had focused on. And so you do have a situation there, I think, where the church here locally, too, is looking at what the real message of Christianity is.
All right, in other matters of religion, I bet you've never heard this song before.
If you feel like a room without a roof, got some clap along. If you feel like happiness is the truth, got some clap along. If you know what happiness is to you, got some clap along. If you feel
It's hard to sit still and listen to that song.
I was supposed to start dancing.
A Muslim filmmaker got together members of his faith community to dance to the song Happy in and around Chicago to change negative stereotypes. Doug, is this an effective strategy?
The song is a little, maybe because I'm getting old, but the song is a little repetitious for my taste. But no, I think it's an interesting idea, and I think this has been done in other places in London. And I think it's fine. It's a young filmmaker. I say more power to him. It assumes a premise that Americans that we have stereotypes against all Muslims. I think that's goes a little too far. I think Americans have a problem with radical Islam, but I mean to start from saying that we all have negative stereotypes about Muslims, I think that's a little bit of an overreach. But I completely understand what this young filmmaker is trying to do. I think it's very clever, and I think any incremental improvement in relations, I think, is fine.
Raquel, quickly, your thoughts?
I agree 100%.
No, I think that it's okay for them to show that, hey, there are people out there that have a stereotype of Muslims, and we have a different interpretation of our faith. I think that's fine for them to express that.
Okay, we'll leave it there. That's our happy ending. We'd like to thank our guests, Doug Ivandahl, Raquel Mitchell, and Dan Mihalopoulos. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
The winter of 2013 was one of Chicago's worst on record. Brutal temperatures carved out more than 200,000 potholes, frustrating city drivers and inspiring one Chicago artist. The tire-flattening, suspension-crushing craters pockmarking Chicago streets may be a nuisance to drivers. But to mosaic artist Jim Bacher, they're a gravel gallery for his latest work. The Northside resident got the idea watching drivers dodge giant potholes on his block. He decided to turn this ugly problem into a masterpiece.
You know, you see people, what looks like drunk driving, and all they are avoiding potholes with their cars. I've seen that pothole crew a couple of times over the course of a year, and I'm like, wow, maybe if I know mosaics done the right way can last a long time.
Jim, who's been creating mosaic art for the past 15 years, took his love for the craft to the streets, literally. But first, he spends hours in his basement studio planning his design.
You want to keep a pretty good distance between each piece, because you need, especially if cars are going to be going over it, you need a lot of that concrete to get a good grip on these pieces of marble and glass.
Although thousands of potholes still exist, Jim says the process for selecting just the right location for his art is complicated.
It can't be in the center of the street. It has to be a certain size, not too big, not too small, not too deep. And then the area around it needs to be pretty stable. You know, it's not like I'm making money on these things either. They run in the neighborhood for materials of about $50 a piece.
To date, Jim has installed 6 pieces of pothole art, mainly in the north side of Chicago. He admits creating these pieces can be a tedious process.
So what I'll do is I load up the car with buckets and my concrete and the artwork, of course. First, I'll clean out the hole with a broom to get at least all the fine gravel and whatnot out of it, to make the hole as clean as possible. Then I've got a bucket that I'll put concrete in, and I've got my water, and so I'll hand mix up a batch of concrete. I'll pour that into the hole. Okay, there, it's showtime. I've got my artwork with me, which again is marble and glass that's attached to a cheesecloth, and it's sitting on a rigid board. And so I'll put that next to that filled up pothole of mortar, and I'll just slide that board out from underneath the artwork. And at that point, I take my hot water jug and I pour hot water all over the top of that cheesecloth and let it sit for about 10 minutes. You tediously, slowly work off that cheesecloth off the marble and glass. Depending on temperature and how wet it is and whatnot, you start to just kind of clean the surface. A lot of times you get it relatively clean, and then you protect it with traffic cones, and then you come back, whether it's a number of hours later or the next day, and then you go in with wire brushes and a little metal pick to get off the residue, and then it's essentially done. So the idea of permanence runs throughout all of my artwork, and doing my pothole art in the city gives me an opportunity to leave my mark on the city of Chicago, which I love, which is great.
You might wonder about the numbers Jim puts in his art. He just includes them at random. And his next installation will be on Rush Street. Stay tuned.
Well, that does it for this week. You are now in the loop. Until next time, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Good night.
Good night.